welcome to this jazz guitar lesson. I'm Chris Whiteman and thanks for joining me. This lesson is part 2 of a series where we're looking at comping through the 1-6-2-5 progression. So in part 1 we looked at the basic root motion of the 1-6-2-5. We voiced basic harmony using shell voicings, and we added some passing chords and rhythmic syncopation. In part 2 we're going to be using all of those same concepts, but we're going to be focusing on building out our chord voicings by adding extensions and alterations to increase the complexity of the harmony. We're also going to be utilizing voice leading to guide us in the choices of the voicings we use. So I've put together 10 examples of the 1-6-2-5 sequence using some of my favorite voicings. And so I'll play each one and then we'll break it down. 1, 2, 3, 4. So example 1 is pretty straightforward. I'm using a C major 7 drop 2 voicing for the 1 chord. In the previous lesson we were just using a C major 7 shell voicing, so we had omitted the 5th. Now we're putting the 5th back in, and we have the 3rd on top. And I'm aware of what the highest note in the voicing is because this is going to help me move to the next voicing and consider my options for voice leading. And so the next voicing we're going to use A7 sharp 5, right? So that's an A7 shell voicing. I have my root, my flat 7, and my major 3rd, and then I've added the sharp 5. Now this is an altered extension, so it's adding a degree of dissonance or tension, but I move into it by a half step. So that's what we call voice leading. And it offers a smooth transition rather than jumping to like an A7 sharp 5 up here, although there can be times when that's appropriate. You may want that, but here we're going to kind of focus on small movement, really focusing on the voice leading, so that the voices are either staying consistent or they're moving in small intervals, right? So C major 7, A7 sharp 5, and then we have our 2 chord. So we're using D minor 7 shell voicing in the first lesson. Well, there's our D minor 7 shell, root, flat 3rd, flat 7th, and I'm going to add the 9 on top, right? So from the sharp 5 down to the minor 9, right? So this is D minor 9. And you see the melody now, or the top note of each voicing. We started with E, we moved up to F, we're moving back to E, and then for the 5 chord, we're going to play G7. There's our shell voicing, root, flat 7th, major 3rd. Now I'm going to use sharp 5 again, right? And then for our resolution back to the 1, I'm actually going to move down a half step and resolve to C major 9 to get a little color. So that's C major 7 shell voicing, root, 3rd, major 7th, and I've added the 9 on top. And so if you put that sequence together, this is what you get. And if you pay attention to the top note of each chord, right? One more time. Example 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. So example 2, we're just adding some additional motion for the dominant 7th chords, right? So for the 6 chord and the 5 chord. So we're going to start with C major 7 for the 1. We're going to move to A7 sharp 5 and immediately move to its tritone substitution of E flat 9, right? So really the only thing that's changing is the bass note. All the other voices are remaining a constant. Now, in order to fit both voicings in, instead of a half note for A7, now I'm playing a quarter note on A7 and a quarter note on E flat 9. And then I'm resolving to my D minor 9. And you see, now we get really nice voice leading. Everything is just moving down stepwise, right, into the D minor 9. And then from here, we're moving to the G7 sharp 5 for one beat, and then adding the tritone substitution on beat 4, and then this is resolving to C major 9. So you get a lot of nice voice leading here. Example 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. So example 3, we're going to start with the one chord voiced as a major 9, just to give it a different color, right? We've been ending with the major 9 in the previous two examples. So now we're starting on the major 9. And instead of going to A7 sharp 5, I'm going to go to A7 sharp 11. So we have our A7 shell voicing, root, flat 7th, major 3rd, and the sharp 11. Right? And that sharp 11 is sitting a half step above the D, which was the 9 on the C major 9. So we have D on top of this C major, and then we move up a half step to get that E flat. That's our 6th chord. We're going to our 2. I'm going to move that top voice up again, and we get D minor 9. Right? And then I'm going to come back for our 5 chord and play the sharp 5, and then back down to the C major 9. So if we look at the top voice, right, we see that it's moving up chromatically, and then it's turning around and moving back chromatically. So example 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so example 4, what we're doing is we're really looking at the 6th chord, and we're looking at utilizing more than one voicing. So like we did in example 2, where we played A7 sharp 5 and then played the tritone sub. Here we're going to do a similar concept, but we're going to use basically an inversion of the A7 to add some motion. So we're starting on C major 9, right? Then we go to A7 sharp 11, but I'm only going to sit here for one beat, and then I'm going to move to C sharp diminished, right? And what this is doing is it's still functioning as an A7. Now it's functioning as an A7 with a flat 9, right? So here's our A7, straight A7. I have my 3rd, flat 7th, root 5th. If I raise my root, that becomes the flat 9 of A7. I don't have an A in the bass anymore. I have a C sharp. But this is creating voice leading in the bass motion because my next chord is D minor. And so I'll move right to my D minor 9. Right? And so it sounds like this. Right? Now, we're going to move to the 5 chord. I'm going to play a natural 13. Right? So we're getting the dominant sound with an extension. It's not an alteration, so it doesn't have a lot of tension. But now I'm going to move to the tritone substitution. So my G7 on beat 3, and then my D flat 9 on beat 4, and resolving into the C major 9. And so that sequence sounds like this. Example 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. start out with the same approach for the 1 and the 6. So C major 9, A7 sharp 11, and then here's my C sharp diminished, functioning as an A7 flat 9. Now I want the melody to keep going up, so instead of D minor 9, I'm going to use a D minor 7 drop 2, right? Because now our melody has moved, right? And I want to keep that melody going up, so when I go to my G7, I'm going to add the sharp 5, but I'm going to put the G on top, right? And that continues that directional movement of the top voice. And then I'm going to retain that G on top for my resolution and resolve to a C6-9. Right, so that's root, 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 5th. Example 6. A 1, 2, 3, 4. In example 6, we are really looking at creating a new voicing for the dominant chords. So again, back to the 6 chord and the 5 chord in this sequence, and we're going to be treating them as dominant 7ths, flat 9, sharp 5. So 2 alterations. And I'm going to start my 1 chord with a new color as well. We're going to make this a C major 13. Right, and so that's my root. C is my root, B is my major 7, E is my 3rd, and then I have A as my 13 on top. And so now I'm looking at movement on the 1st string. So C major 13, go to my A7, and I'm going to finger it this way because I want to get the sharp 5 and the flat 9, right? So I have A as my root, G is my flat 7, C sharp is my major 3rd, F is my sharp 5, and B flat is my flat 9. So a very full, rich harmony, dominant harmony that has some tension, some dissonance, right? And then I'm going to resolve to D minor 7, drop 2, right? Root, 5th, flat 7th, flat 3rd, 5th, and then to G7, flat 9, sharp 5. So it's going to be the same form that we used for on the A. I'm just moving it down to G, right? So if you look at the bottom structure, I have my shell voicing. I have my root, my flat 7th, my major 3rd, and then I have my sharp 5 and my flat 9. And then I'm going to resolve down to C6-9. Right. So if you look at what's happening on the top voice of those harmonies, we went A, B flat, A flat, G. Right? That sounds like this. Example 7. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, we're going to look at some alternate voicings for the dominant chords. And this time we're going to introduce the combination of the natural 13 and the flat 9, which this comes from the diminished scale. This is a very tense harmony. So one of those harmonies that grew on me over time. It was pretty tense at first, and now I really appreciate this harmony. So we're going to start with C major 7, and then our A13 flat 9, right? And I finger it this way. I'm barring the index. I've got my index catching the root, the flat 7th. I've got my middle finger on the major 3rd, my ring finger on the flat 9, and my pinky on the 13. And then to D minor 7, drop 2. And then I am moving to G13 flat 9. And then resolving to C6-9. So that sequence again. if you look at what's happening in the top line there, we start on G, move up a minor third, and then we're turning around and coming down chromatically. All right, so the next three examples, example 8, 9, and 10, we are going to be revisiting some of the elements that we looked at in part 1. So syncopation, some passing chords, and chromaticism. Example 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so in example 8, I'm using a little chromatic approach into the 1 chord. So I'm coming in on the end of beat 4 in the measure preceding the downbeat, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. And then I have an anticipation of beat 3 where the 6th chord comes. So I'm coming in on the end of 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4. And then on the 2 chord, I'm playing 2 8th notes, 1 and then I'm anticipating beat 3 with the G7 sharp 5. So you get this 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, and then resolving to C major 9. And that whole sequence sounds like this. 2, 3, 4. Example 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. Example 9. We are adding some more chromatic movement. So I start on C major 7 and I immediately move down to B major 7 and then back to C major 7 with 8th notes. So it sounds like this. 1 and 2, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and there's my anticipation of the A7 sharp 5. Again, normally we would think of that coming in on beat 3. I'm coming in on the end of beat 2. So 1 and 2 and 3. And then on beat 4, I'm using my C sharp diminished, again functioning as an A7 flat 9, to create some voice leading into the D minor, which I'm going to play with 2 8th notes. And then I'm going to anticipate the G13 on the end of beat 2, followed by the tritone sub, D flat 9, on beat 4, and then resolving to C major 9. And that whole sequence sounds like this. 2, 3, 4. Example 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so example 10, it's going to be similar in concept to example 9. I'm using that same type of chromatic motion, except I'm starting with C major 9. So I'm moving C major 9, down to B major 9, back up to C major 9, and then to A7 sharp 11, C sharp diminished, functioning as A7 flat 9. And now I'm going to move up to a D minor 11. All right, so I have my D minor 7, drop 2 voicing, and I'm just replacing the 3rd with the 11th. So we're sacrificing the 3rd for the 11th, which is fine. And then I am going to approach the 5 chord, which is G7, right? I'm going to approach it from a half step above. So I'm adding harmonic motion here. Instead of 2 beats on D minor, it's 1 beat, D minor 11, then I move to A flat 13, and now I'm going to move to my G13 flat 9, to my tritone sub, which is D flat 9, to C major 9. All right. So this is probably the most sophisticated example we have, and that's going to sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, and. All right. And now the lead line, the melody on top of each chord, is a little bit more sophisticated. It sounds like this. So we kind of have a melody there. All right, so the final exercise I'm calling a comping study. It's simply just examples 8, 9, and 10 strung together continuously. So we're going to look at it as a vamp of a 1-6-2-5 and play it over and over. You can put the metronome on, and this is going to really give you the opportunity to refine some of the syncopated rhythms, as well as start to build some muscle memory with your chord voicings and the technical requirements to move fluidly between them. So here's the comping study. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we're going to slow it down and do it again at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you found this information useful. All the examples are on a downloadable PDF for my Patreon subscribers, and that PDF will have standard notation and tablature. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.